Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Hester, and I am being joined today by Robert Durouk from Indiana University. He will be joining us here momentarily. And I'm with Mays & Associates. I'm an IT auditor, and today I'm going to be talking about nation states as a threat source or a threat actor. And one of the reasons why we talk about this is when we do risk assessments, we need to determine the capabilities of the actors or the hackers or whoever's going to be attacking us so that we know how much time and effort that they may put into attacking us, because that will inform our risk management decisions. And so oftentimes we need to know, is it a criminal organization or is it a nation state? You'll find out in this presentation, some of that doesn't matter sometimes. If you're being hacked, you're being hacked. So one of the things that we want to do is try to understand where our enemy's coming from, what are some of the things that they're doing now so that we know what to do to avoid them, or at least be able to recognize when something's happening. And so we've seen in the last few years an increase in nation-state either backed or sponsored or directed attacks. Sometimes it's hard to make attribution directly to a nation state saying they are responsible for this, often obviously because they're going to deny it. Our nation will deny if they did it, and everybody else's nation will deny when they've done it. So oftentimes this is a good, I don't want to say good, but it's the best effort to find out who is actually behind these things. Oftentimes they also have somebody or they're working with somebody else, and so it makes it really difficult sometimes to figure out who's doing it. But some of the common actors that we run into, and if you follow the news at all, you'll see all these articles. I'm not giving you anything that's classified or not available in the straight up media, but you'll find that certain nations keep on coming up in some type of, as nation state actors engaged in cyber warfare, cyber espionage, hacking, whatever you want to call it. So some of the ones that we run into and hear from a lot are China, Iran, Israel, North Korea, United Kingdom, yeah, they're one of our allies, Russia, United States, yes, our own nation. So you will hear all of these often in the news. And there's been a noticeable increase in nation-state sponsored or directed attacks, whether it's everything from ransomware just to propaganda. And seeing this increase is nothing new. This has been around for a long time. We've seen it and talked about it years before this, and it really is just an ongoing espionage and warfare just taken to the next level. Nations have been fighting since nations got set up, and they've been spying since there were secrets, and they just have a new tool. The internet, systems, all our information technology, and now they're going to start using those tools. Any tool can be used for good or bad, and so sometimes technology gets used for bad, and that's what we're at right now, is we're seeing that there's this increase in nation states doing it, but it's been around for a while, and I just want you to recognize that it has been around. Yes, Rob, you have something?
Yeah, I just want to, if you back up one slide there, just for a moment. So one of the things that you can kind of see as a progression of this is the proliferation of all of the devices now that we have that are interconnected. There's more endpoints that are now the focus of attacks, and they themselves become targets. So how many individuals have pretty much everything that they ever carry or have is now on a cell phone, for example, or a smartphone? Well, that's an endpoint of an attack vector, right? So it's just becoming, I think that the threat itself is becoming more and more prolific.
Well, what are they saying? Like, we're going to have so many billion Internet of Things devices by 2020, and that's only a year and a half away.
Like 50 billion, something like that.
Well, that's insane.
This is a good example. A friend of ours has a mining apparatus that I just talked to him last week about this. He has 4,500 IP addresses associated to that one mining application or piece of hardware.
Yeah, operational technology is something that is going to keep on. You're going to have a lot of IPs. I mean, this week I'm at a conference, and they're talking about facilities, and they're talking about smart buildings and smart cities and all those types of things. And it's just like more stuff getting put on the network.
Sure. I just wanted to add that the noticeable increase kind of goes hand in hand with the number of these devices that have been created to help us with our lives. But if we don't go through the necessary security precautions, so much, right? So much for security.
Yeah, I think you, just as a shout out, on my blog, learnsecurity.org, O-R-G, you had posted a blog, Rob, about IoT and the need for them to build security in at the beginning. And that's a sidebar, but if anyone's interested in that, it's posted on my blog site. We have to look at this when we look at nation state attacks and say, okay, what is the impact that we're receiving from this? Well, it's costing businesses billions of dollars. It's also a threat to our way of life. There's always this issue that we have to, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, of balancing security and freedom and security and privacy. We have to balance those things, and if we have to increase security so much, then we give up some of our freedom. So it is a threat to our way of life, and that's something that we need to take advantage of and look at, because that should tell us how important this is. And there is a need to be prepared. And I was listening to a keynote speaker this morning. He was from the Department of Homeland Security, and he said, I want you to only take two things away from, there's two things that you need to take away from this section. Risks are real. The risks that he talks about are real risks. And that's what we need to understand, is that the risks are real, they're out there, and we need to be prepared for them. And everyone is a potential target. I know a lot of people, when they see this, they're going to say nation states, oh, you know, China's not going to hack me, or Russia's not going to hack me, or North Korea, I'm not on their radar. Sometimes it's a crime of opportunity, and they just want to use your systems to launch other attacks. And other times, you may have something that they want, and you just don't realize that you have something that they want. At this point in time, what we need to do is we really need to step up our game. Another person had posted in an article online saying that when a nation state is attacking, there is not a lot that we can do with it, right? Because if you're just a small organization, if you're a local government, if you're a school district, if you're a small, medium-sized business, if you're a nonprofit, you probably don't have what's necessary to defend against these attacks. All you can do is do your best effort, right? And it is to put in place the best that you possibly can with cybersecurity. And then on top of that, be prepared with incident response capabilities to contact out as soon as there's an incident to get the problems resolved as fast as possible. A number of local governments have been hit with ransomware, and some of the ransomware is traced back to North Korea. Now, this is an interesting thing. If you got hit by ransomware created by North Korea, is that a cyber war? I mean, we're not treating it like it, but they've attacked us on our own soil. And your business may have been one of the ones that got hit with it. So you're definitely outmanned. The Russians have thousands of cyber troops that they have in their cyber warfare division, and they have thousands of them. That's what we know. They may have more, they may have less, but that's the intelligence that we have that's available to us. One thing that did come out is that our government needs to, the Homeland Security needs to be giving us the information sooner about real threats so that we can take action. A lot of, and this, we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, because there's some interesting sidebars to that one too. So what are their goals? So what are they trying to do? What's their motive? And interesting thing, I was talking to the guy from the Department of Homeland Security. He says he's not really interested in what their motives are. He's just worried about the vulnerabilities that we have, and their attack means, the way that they attack. I think some of it's kind of important when we talk about nation states because there's different types of warfare that may be involved in this. Everything from psychological warfare to economic warfare. And they're very different things, and we typically don't call them warfare, but that's what they are. There is one nation pitting itself against another nation to assert dominance either within a region or globally. And some other nations view it as the next superpower. I think it was Putin that said the next superpower is the one that is ahead of the game on artificial intelligence. So they're looking at that as being strategic enough to make you the new superpower if you can go beyond this. It does that. Things like that do raise all kinds of questions and concerns as to what's going to be the next thing on the agenda as far as warfare goes. But sometimes it's just to steal intellectual property. Sometimes it's to make money. Sometimes it's to destroy stuff, just actually take things out. Sometimes it's part of a military campaign. So there will be a cyber warfare going on, and then an invasion will happen, or a country will be annexed by another country. Sometimes it's just about destabilization. Sometimes it's about intelligence and counterintelligence. Other times it's about sending out disinformation and creating political instability. And we have elections coming up here shortly, within about a month. And so political instability is going to be one of those things that is definitely being targeted right now. I want to start off by talking about cyber warfare and kind of just talking about a little bit of the history. And this goes all the way back to 1985. We see the Russians as far back as 1985. Remember back in 1985, we had the trash 80s, right? We had DOS operating systems, right? We were back in the days when everything was floppy disk. Internet wasn't even really a thing, but look what he's already saying. Now information systems are seen as auxiliary tools, but one day they will lead to military development to a new level as nuclear weapons did before. So the Russians already have this mentality that technology is going to be the new battlefield. And
well, it kind of shows that they've been weaponizing information systems since 1985, right?
Well, I'm sure they have. I'm sure we have too. I mean, we already knew sort of about it. I mean, it goes all the way back to the old days of the Yellow Book or the Rainbow Series books of cybersecurity.
But I think this was an open declaration, like an open statement.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing that they look at in 1996, again, the Chief of General Staff then said, basically saying the high effectiveness of information warfare, which we call it cyber warfare now, but information warfare is synonymous with that, in combination with highly accurate weapons and non-military means, and it's interesting they said non-military means because he's probably talking about propaganda and stuff like that, as means of influence makes it possible to disorganize the system of state of administration, hit strategically important installations and groupings of forces, and affect the mentality and moral spirit of the population. So in other words, they're saying, hey, when we attack, if we're going to attack in a military means, part of it's going to be including cyber warfare. From that point until now, until we got to the Ukraine incident, so we'll talk about in a second, this has been their mode of operation. We've seen this when they invaded Georgia and other campaigns that they've done. This tactic of starting a cyber warfare first, starting with propaganda, fake news stories, all kinds of stuff putting on the internet before they attack in. And then attacking cyber-wise, if they can, to take out strategic utilities, critical infrastructures for nations. A little bit after that, in 2009, the United States set up Cyber Command. Now, Cyber Command just basically kind of put everything into one house. So the Department of Defense, NSA kind of were doing their own things, and they kind of brought it together and said, hey, let's work together. So when I say Cyber Command, it's not that it's a new thing in 2009. It's that there's a new emphasis, and the Department of Defense recognizes at that point in time that this is a battlefield. This is a theater of war, and we need to make sure that we're capable in that theater. And they're working closely with the NSA to do that. And the CIA obviously is involved in this process as well. So the entire intelligence community and the Department of Defense started doing it. And one little note, this is a sidebar, it's really an interesting sidebar. So if you go to the United States Cyber Command, you get their little logo, and you look it up on the internet, there's a little numbers all written around the inside of the logo on that little gold band there on the center circle. And I was looking at the numbers, I'm like, okay, that's either going to be a key or it's got to be something hidden. Well, it's the MD5 hash of their mission statement. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They put a little Easter egg in there for you. Anyway, so they started up in 2009. 2010, Stuxnet is the first cyber weapon that's been released. And this cyber weapon basically was malicious code that broke into systems, and then once it got into the systems, it was targeting very specific operational technology or SCADA elements within Iranian centrifuges to stop them from continuing their uranium enrichment process. So it basically got in there and messed with the system, told the system it was running fine when it wasn't, and just made them go and destroyed them, basically. So this is an interesting sidebar in this, is that when we look at this Stuxnet, even the director of the NSA and CIA said, hey, this is just like 1945 when we dropped, the bombs on Japan, right? This is this is a game changer at this point in time. Is basically what happened. This was a move from the theoretical. So back in 1985, they were already talking about, hey, this is going to happen. It became real. And cyber weapons caused real world damage, right? And this was completely straight up directed at, it was warfare, basically. And so this was the first time that we actually had that, and that was with Stuxnet. Now, in 2014, Russia was talking about the hybrid warfare, and they're continuing on with their cyber warfare, and they formed their cyber troops. And they did the same thing the U.S. did. They basically centralized all their cyber war operations into one place. And they found that when they did that, they were making their troops were much more effective and stronger than previously that they've had going on. So they were very much working on getting a much better capability, and I think they've done so. We had attempts in the United States in about 2014 where this black energy exploit tool was found on networks in American power plants and water utilities. And it's interesting because this tool is related to a tool that the Russians have used elsewhere. It doesn't mean that Russian were in our utilities. It may have been somebody else. The North Koreans have recently done it, so we're not sure necessarily who it is, but it's interesting that the specific tool or exploit that was being used is one that's also being used. So the question is that an attempt to see what they can do, or were they trying to launch an attack and they failed at it? Don't know what was going on there, but it's interesting to pay attention to kind of what's going on. And then we have 2017, where their new Chief General Staff says information space opens a wide asymmetrical possibilities for reducing the fighting potential of an enemy. And what he's talking about there, especially when you get back to their activities in the Russian region and former Soviet bloc nations that they've invaded or tried to annex or whatever, what has happened is they have pre-attacked cyber-wise before any other movements were happening. In addition to that, they also have a very strong propaganda machine internally within the nation to make sure that, Vladimir Putin wins the elections. And we've seen evidence of that as well in reports. And again, none of this is classified information. This is just what's out there and available. I do have one question here from an attendee, and I'll look at it here in just a minute. I want to finish up this section, and I'll go back to that one. Then we had WannaCry. WannaCry is a computer that was just sent out into the wild, and it used an eternal blue exploit in older operating systems, Windows operating systems, including Windows XP and Windows Server 2003, that were end of life. And that ransomware hit computers around the world, 150 countries. I think some estimates said over 250,000 computers were hit by this ransomware. By far, it's one of the, I would have to say by far, it's one of the largest attacks that has happened, but it's not the most expensive. We'll get to that one next. But WannaCry was one of those ones. The interesting thing is we found out that North Korea was behind it. We know who the actual, one of the designers is for it. He's on the top wanted list of the FBI. So we're aware of the players and how a lot of this code was created and has been used. And again, this WannaCry stuff has attacked indiscriminately. So what does that tell us about North Korea? If they are behind it, and the NSA says they are, and so does other nations, so let's assume that they are. What is their motive? What are they trying to do? It seems to be make money, because this is what cyber criminals do. Cyber criminals will do the ransomware, they get the money, and they use it to do more research and development, figure out new ways to break into systems. Why would a country do that? Well, maybe they're trying to make money, or maybe they're just trying to cause as much havoc as possible. What's interesting is that the WannaCry one, people paid and they got their information back. So it wasn't destructive. So that's one of those things. Here's another question that came in. Do you believe that unlike historical military wars, cyber wars will be a continuous process? I think we're going to have a hard time with it. It's a good question. One of the reasons why I think we're going to have a hard time with it is that what is warfare and what is espionage? Because espionage is going on all the time, whether we know it or not. Although a war may not be going on all the time, we definitely always have espionage going on. So will we always have cyber warfare? At this point in time, I think we're continuously in a state of warfare. Just because understanding the different motives for some of the nations that are there, whether it be North Korea or Iran, or it seems to be any nation that the UN or the US puts sanctions on, decides that they're going to lash out with some type of cyber warfare if they have the abilities to do it. But you're always going to have some type of an attack from other nations, just from an intelligence gathering perspective. And it's really interesting. Some of these things that have come up, I was reading in an intelligence journal, and they were talking about, years ago they were talking about just nation states and spying and everything that's going on and the use of technology and how it's just not going to stop and it's just going to keep on going. So I think that there's a really close line between that. So when is it a war and when is it just intelligence gathering? Because sometimes it's gathering information, other times it's actually attacking it. But we have countries that are systematically trying to get apparently intellectual property from us so that they can better their nation in an ongoing effort over lots of years, have been doing so. So does that mean the warfare has been going on, or is that really cyber intelligence there? You see, there's a little bit of a gray area there. I hope that answers the question. So, because I think that there's going to be a lot of gray areas going forward. Russia's attack on the Ukraine in 2017, which is just a couple months after WannaCry. A bunch of Ukrainian companies, government agencies had a swarm of cyber attacks hitting them in succession, and then hit their banking system, and it also took out their power grid. And they were without power, and I don't know the exact amount of time, because some places got back up and running faster than others. but there were a number of places and organizations hacked. It's a part of their hybrid approach of attacking. They used a tactic that we call waterhole, and that is basically, you know, if you're out in the savannah in Africa and you're a lion and you want to go looking for food, you're going to go to the water hole, right? Because that's where everybody's going to have to go. Everybody's going to have to go to the water hole and drink. So it's like, let your prey come to you. So what they did is they went to a website that is used to update tax and accounting software that Ukrainian government, to pay taxes for Ukrainian government. So a lot of organizations use it, and they infected it with the virus. And then the malware did something different. This malware acted like it was ransomware, but it wasn't ransomware. It was actually designed to destroy. But people got it and they thought it's ransomware. They assumed that it's cyber criminals again and that they just need to do it. Well, it wasn't really ransomware. It really was designed to destroy. Interesting thing, it was the Eternal Blue exploit again that was attacked. Microsoft had a patch for it March of 2017, and NotPetya was launched in June of 2017. Now, that should tell us right off the bat, patch management is very, very important. And getting it done on a timely basis. But the Eternal Blue also hit a lot of machines that are running Windows XP and other types of things. Just the other day, I don't know where I was. I was at some place and there was a kiosk that was in the lobby for some place. I think it was a museum or something. And it got an error screen and it was Windows XP. And I'm like, oh my God, these people need to update their stuff. You shouldn't be running all those old OSs. They're not supported anymore. Patches aren't available for them. And things like this can easily happen with them. And Microsoft had to come up with a patch for XP in 2003 because so many people are still using it for that. And then again, I already mentioned this, hackers connected with North Korea were, trying to get into the utilities here in the United States, trying to take out the electrical grid. So it's one of those things that is an ongoing process. Now, here's the irony, I guess you want to say. This tool that was used, the exploit for Eternal Blue, was developed by the NSA. The NSA got it leaked because they didn't keep track of it or whatever. Someone got a hold of it and leaked it. When they did, the North Korean hackers and Russian hackers are the ones that used that exploit that was found by the NSA and developed by the NSA against us. So we create a weapon basically to use for our arsenal. It gets out and now somebody else uses it against us. So that's where we're going with that one. A little bit ironic there. As a part of this, NATO has a Title V article in their agreement, and that's basically that they will render aid to another nation that's being attacked by somebody else. And so another nation will come in and help defend another nation if someone's invading. They were speaking about this, I think it was earlier this year, that Title V section of their agreement or treaty is they wanted to apply to cyber war as well. In addition to that, EU governments in the European Union have warned other states, and they wanted to make sure they made a formal declaration of this, that if you attack us, critical infrastructure in our nations, that we will respond with conventional weapons. So here again, we have a very real world impact. We could end up, shooting bombs at them or doing airstrikes, or I'm not sure exactly what you would try to take out. If you don't know where the attack's coming from, or the attack's coming from everywhere else, from other machines that they've compromised elsewhere around the world, how do you stop it by attacking? I don't know. And this may then escalate the warfare. But if you don't show strength, what will happen? Then they will keep on doing it. So it's a catch-22 situation there. But they're planning on taking reactions. And NATO understands this hybrid warfare idea of it, and so they want to come up with counter support teams. They want to share intelligence amongst NATO community, do training and exercise, and really work on helping all those other nations that are part of NATO to help prevent this hybrid warfare and try to thwart those efforts that others are having. What we also see, which is a little bit interesting, is that nation states are partnering with cyber criminals, or they're recruiting cyber criminals, or they are forcing cyber criminals to join them. There's a really good, at the RSA conference last year, we were talking about Fancy Bear and the Russian hacking collectives. A lot of them are just cyber criminals. Russia finds out who they are and basically says, look, you're either going to go away to jail and disappear forever, or you're going to work for us when they catch a hacker. So if you're a hacker and you're in Russia, you get caught, you're going to end up working for them. And I guarantee it's going to be like Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back with Lando Calrissian. They're going to alter the deal, and you pray they don't alter it any further. So that's exactly what the type of situation that you have over there. A lot of Russian hackers get out of Russia once they have their skills and launch their attacks from other nations if they're cyber criminals. It's strange bedfellows, because law enforcement that's supposed to be trying to capture these guys tell them, hey, if you work for us, basically you can hack whoever you want, don't hack us, and we'll let you do whatever you're going to do, but you're going to hack for us when we need you to hack for us. Interesting, strange bedfellows that they have, but that's what's going on. And then we have a very complicated web of players involved in this. Again, a couple of different articles I've read in intelligence journals, they have multiple levers. They may have up to 7 levels of shell companies set up to get people to work for them that you don't even know that you're working for another nation state. There's one example of a guy that went to work for a security firm as a consultant to attack another business to see if he could breach that business as like a pen tester, and he thought he was working for that business. Turns out he wasn't. He was actually working for another nation state that actually had multiple shell companies set up. And the problem is they keep on moving the shell companies around, so it's hard to trace and follow who's part of what. But they were able to piece together enough of it to find out that it went back to a known shell company that was owned by Russia and had been used in other types of things. They even have handlers, just like traditional espionage, getting the hackers to work for them. So and this makes it a little bit more obscure. You can't really point at it and say, hey, that was Russia, because they'll point at it and say, no, it was that guy, and he's just a cyber criminal. So it makes it difficult to attribute to them. And if you can't definitively say, yes, it was Russia, you're going to go to war on that, right? You really want, somebody in Congress is going to say, we're not going to go to war unless you have absolute proof. So it makes it a difficult situation, the complicated stuff. This year, just last month, there's a House bill that passed that would say, hey, if nation state attackers are attacking, we're going to call them out. I don't know what they're going to do, with that. Hey, pointing fingers, hey, it's them doing it. Okay. And if it's significant threats, then they'll impose sanctions. The EU came out with a thing and says, hey, if you do it, we may respond with conventional warfare. And we're saying, hey, we're going to point at you and say, hey, you did this. I don't know. We need to work on this a little bit.
Do you think that's what the push behind Title V was for the EU?
I think that what it was is they wanted to come out with a strong statement to say, look, we're taking this seriously, and you either back off or we're gonna get into fisticuffs here. You know what I mean? They're trying to make a strong statement, you know. And to some extent, I think you do have to make a strong statement, because right now some of these nations are just doing it indiscriminately, and they don't care about the consequences. And people's lives are at stake for some of this stuff. You know, you take out the power in a hospital or something, a lot of people can end up dead.
Well, that's exactly what happened with WannaCry, right? When it hit Great Britain.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And the healthcare systems and stop surgeries from happening. And
yeah, you know, and if it's a life-threatening surgery, then, you know, there's human lives in there. And if Russia shot a UK citizen on the street and he died when he was visiting in Russia, there would be uproar, right? You know what I mean? And here they did the exact same thing. Basically, they kill somebody, and it's like, oh, this is a new way to kill people, and we don't know how to deal with it, right? And part of that is intent. If they're shooting him in the street, then there's obviously clear intent. If it's a WannaCry thing, was North Korea really trying to take out hospitals, and kill people, or are they just, being an annoyance? I don't know. So you're right. There's a little bit of gray area in some of this stuff, and some of this stuff I think will be defined better in the future. But right now, it's just all that. And somebody had one of the questions here, and this may be a good time to talk about it, and that is people have concern about privacy, and most online businesses require too much personal information for customers, and they get no choice to give the information to the companies. And I think that's changing. There's some legislation that's being kind of worked on. It hasn't come to fruition. A couple times it keeps on popping up. And that's to come up with a National Breach Disclosure Act and something similar to what the European Union has with GDPR. But California is working on something along those lines too, at least for California residents, that would require businesses do certain things with the information. And if somebody wants to be forgotten, they can say, forget me. But yes, they have a lot of our information. So what happens when an organization breaks into it? Well, here's a good question. The Equifax, who's behind Equifax breach? What kind of information do they have? Not only that, remember, even worse information to get out there, the Office of Personnel Management in the federal government was hacked, and they got information on employees that work for the federal government, including their clearance, background, checks, all that kind of information. So if I'm a nation state and I'm like, hey, I want to start, trying to blackmail people or get information from different agencies within the United States, guess what? The best place to go look for that kind of stuff is if you have the OPM stuff, to see who has clearance for that kind of stuff, where they work, and then you can then find all kinds of stuff about them online, and then use that information against them. So yeah, you'll see that nation-state hackers or nation-state actors are definitely involved in it, and if they get the information from some places, they may be able to actually put that to work or combine that, because it's a lot like big data, right? So intelligence and big data are kind of similar. You get all this information from all these different locations, you try to put together a picture of it like a big puzzle piece. And in the intelligence agencies, they try to do that all the time. And they use sophisticated tools to do this, but they can go into social media, look at everything that you post, and they kind of figure out like what kind of a person you are. And businesses do the same thing, right? The businesses do it so they can figure out, okay, what do I need to sell this guy, right? So they look at my Facebook thing and say, hey, he likes Jeeps. Let's sell him some Jeep parts. Right, but the hackers that are hacking into stuff for other things, they're looking more for like military troop movements. Were you on that? What's that? Ashley Madison, right? People with clearances from the OPM database, people that their clearances were exposed on that database, the Ashley Madison database. There's like over 1,000 people that were had clearances that were in that breach. That means another foreign nation says, hey, look, there's 1,000 people that we can blackmail. I mean, because they put the two pieces of information together from two different sources. So yes, there's too much information out there. I agree with that. And we have a hard time dealing with it. This is a discussion point for you guys to think about and take away after this session, and that is, hackers that are working for cyber governments or nation states that are attacking other nation states or other places, whether it's businesses or local governments, are they considered cyber criminals? And if so, then law enforcement, and that's traditionally the way we've dealt with it, is law enforcement tries to find out who the people are, get extraditions in place to get them to the United States, to charge them with charges, and then go through the process of trial. But if they're engaged in cyber warfare, are they enemy combatants? Because if they're enemy combatants, that's a different story, and we treat those folks differently, and especially if they're attacking us, and they're actively attacking us, we've been known to, have a drone go out there and do a very targeted attack to take out enemy combatants. No court, no trial, no nothing. They're an enemy combatant, we take them out. So there's a difference there, and we still treat it like law enforcement. I don't know if that's going to help us in the future or not. Certainly flying into another nation's airspace with a drone that has a missile to try and take out somebody is going to cause all kinds of issues. What's next? What do you expect next to happen in this? And I don't have to speculate on that. Putin already is talking about it and basically says the next nation that leads in artificial intelligence is going to be the ruler of the world. So he's looking at this as artificial intelligence is the next nuclear bomb. Yes, we have these sophisticated attacks, but once we put artificial intelligence behind it, we can really do some damage. That's what he's looking at it. Elon Musk is really worried about it. He's talked about it multiple times in different public talks about the risks of AI, and the genie's out of the bottle. It's already out there. Businesses are already using it. And we'll talk about it probably in our second session, because this is going to be 2 sessions now, because it's taken longer than I thought to get through it. So next week we'll have session 2. We'll talk about some of this stuff. But one of the things that we have is businesses now. You're an international business, and you do business here in the United States, and you do business in Russia, and they both have different ways of looking at things. And once recently, Russia went to Hewlett-Packard and said, hey, we want to look at your code. We want to make sure your code's secure, so we need you to give us the back door so we can evaluate the code. Now, here's the thing. Hewlett-Packard's like, hey, one, it's our intellectual property, we want to do it, but 2, we don't want you to find a vulnerability that we don't know about, and then you start using it, right? And if you give it to Russia, are you going to give it to the United States so that they can find the same thing, or not? And if you're Hewlett-Packard, do you even know? So now businesses are kind of mixed in the middle of all of this stuff too, and it makes it hard for them to do business in different countries, especially when countries are coming in there and saying, hey, I want to see your source code. And we'll talk a little bit about that coming up. Part of what we have with what you want to call cyber warfare is also psychological warfare as a part of what it is doing. And part of what we got going on with psychological warfare, it's been around for a long time, and what it's doing is they're trying to sow deception, distortion, dishonesty, and they'll use whatever means necessary to do that. Sometimes they'll do they want to leave us divided is basically the overall things, and they use something called mimemic engineering. And you've heard the term memes. Like a meme is like a graphic or a thing that someone retweets or they repost because they like it or they agree with it or whatever it is. And the problem is with it, it can grow uncontrollably. Something can go on the internet and just take off. And basically, that's what they try to do. And they use that. And the vulnerability, if we're talking about a risk assessment, what's the vulnerability? The vulnerability is us, people, and the fact that we have a cognitive bias. What is a cognitive bias? It's just our tendency to follow our unconscious inferences. Let me put it a different way. We have a predetermined set of beliefs about the world and how it works, and we have a tendency to retweet things that we agree with and and retweet or repost things that we agree with. And right now in this nation, especially before election time, you're going to see a lot of this. You're going to have people that are Democrats. They don't care whether it's true or not. They're going to repost something that fits their belief system. And you're going to have the same thing on the Republican side. They're going to retweet things that they agree with uncritically, just accept whatever it is. And you see that already now, and we call it politics, but really, interesting thing behind all of that is, so here's 2 memes about not treating the troll. And why do I say the troll? Because a lot of times online, you call somebody a troll who's posting stuff. Guess what? A lot of what's happened in the past has actually been related to Russia. So our favorite friend over there at Russia, he says, propaganda must be smart, competent, and effective. So they're definitely looking at, and they're upping their game on it. So they're actually having a troll army. And again, you don't want to feed the troll army, to pay bloggers, hackers, and journalists. They do it in their own country, and they're doing it outside of their own country, basically to set up fake social media accounts that then can propagate all this information. They have people that answer these accounts and, you know, spread information, and whether it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, they're putting content out there to influence people. They are picking, and we know this, we found out the information here. So they've had hundreds of fake accounts with millions of followers. So a lot of people are following these accounts that have been made up by, we know, Russians, and in some case, Iranians. There's been reports that Iranians set up Facebook accounts trying to be friends with people in the military so that they can spy on them to see if they will release any information on Facebook saying, oh, my son is going to be deployed and he's going to Afghanistan, he's in the Marines, or whatever it is. They're looking for that type of stuff, so they friend people on Facebook to watch all that stuff. Anyway, some of the topics that they... Yeah.
Hey, Doc, interesting thing about this, it was discovered during the last presidential election that these nation states were behind these groups that started like rallies, but they started them from both sides. So they, the attackers would have a group that then had members who were pro, and then they had another group that they were sponsoring that was the opposite, right? And the goal was to try to split the nation against it during the election. I thought it was very interesting that the fact that it's not that they back one side or the other, it's that they want to cause chaos and split, and that's their whole focus.
You're absolutely right on that. And one of the things that's really interesting about it is right here, here's the topics that we know that they're definitely working on. Texas independence, gun rights, Black Lives Matter, and anything racism related. They are putting out memes out there to do this. In addition to that, they were actually helping activists here in the United States set up rallies and protests. Specifically for the Black Lives Matter, they had a whole bunch of media that they were setting out there, and they were posting things trying to incite violence. What was the goal that they were doing? To set up discord, division, and political destabilization in the United States, to get people fighting with one another. And if you're looking on Facebook, I know a lot of people that were on Facebook at the last election, they just got off Facebook because they didn't want to see all the political posts. And the thing is, going back to that meme theory, people, if it agrees with them, they just retweet it or they repost it, and people get upset about it. And that's going back to that last one. And this is why I picked this meme as the meme that I wanted to show everybody, and that is stop feeding the trolls. We have to be rational about it. We have to understand that we are being pitted against each other, and it's known. It's in all the news sources. You can go in and find out all that kind of stuff. So take a look at that. Trolling is something they do. Here's some examples of some of the stuff that they've done. They pretended to be ISIS cyber caliphate, and then they were sending military wives death threats, pretending to be Muslim extremists. And the thing is, the Muslim extremists get blamed for everything, and they're not even the ones doing it. So again, Russia's pitting, liberals and conservatives and Republicans and Democrats against each other, and they're pitting our nation against other nations and religions against other religions. This is ridiculous. We all have to kind of wake up to that. And there's been a person who's been trying to expose this troll army that Russia has, and I think she's gotten some death threats and all that kind of stuff related to it too. So it's not, we know they're meddling in elections, not just our election here in the United States. And it wasn't just Russia. We found China doing it too. Specifically China dealing with Cambodia, and then specifically in 2012 with the Mitt Romney campaign, China was responsible for the breach there, and the Russians for the Democratic DNC this last election. So they've actually been involved in also breaking in and finding out information and then releasing that information at a very strategic point in time during the election cycle. So here's one of the things that we have to be concerned about, and that is if social media accounts are thought to be related to external nations and they're removed or blocked, which Facebook and Twitter have been doing this, and YouTube has been doing it, so they've been censoring those accounts, how will it impact freedom of speech for us? And that's one of the things that we have to think about. And this is where I'm saying that our way of life is threatened here as well. So, and then the next question is, who determines and how is it determined that an account is propaganda mill or a troll? How do we do that? And then how do we balance that freedom and privacy with security? These are going to be very difficult questions to answer because you may have somebody here. We've tried our freedom of speech. We did. Right now, it seems like if someone disagrees with us, we just want them to shut up, and that's unfortunate here in this United States. What we want to have is a dialogue. We need to be able to have a civil dialogue about something, and people need to be able to disagree. And even if we disagree with them, they have the right to say what they have to say. They don't have the right for me to like it. Just because they say whatever they want to say, I may not like it, and I have the right to not like it. I also have the right not to listen, right? But they have the right to say it. That's a very fundamental right that we have here in the United States. And if we start censoring, what happens? If we don't look for those accounts and try to block those accounts, then what happens in the next election? Because I guarantee it's going to happen this election too. What if Facebook decides, hey, we don't want another Republican guy, so we're just going to call all these groups that look like they're ultra-conservative, we're just going to call them all Russians, even if they're not, right? So now you have an organization has the ability now to sway public opinion. That's another scary thing, and that's a whole other topic, which is not related to what a company can do to sway political opinion. When something like Facebook or Twitter is now the new freedom of press, but they don't want to call themselves freedom of press, so they want to say, oh, no, yeah, we still want to control all this stuff. Well, now that is the press, right? Everybody has their opinion, everybody has their platform, you can follow or not follow them. So unfortunately now, that's one of the issues that we're going to have to deal with going forward. I'm going to answer the last question. If anybody else has any questions, please put them in there. Next time, we're going to talk about cyber espionage, and we're going to see if we can get it scheduled for next week, if not the weekend after that. And then we have a number of seminars that we have planned coming up. I'm working on getting different speakers related to those. So if you want to follow our Bright Talk channel, then you'll get information about those upcoming seminars. And you can always go back and watch the ones that are previously recorded. So if, I know that some people logged in late, you can go back to the beginning of this one. And if you can't make the next one that we do next week, don't worry about it. You can come back and watch it at a later date. But sign up for it so at least you know when it's coming up. So the question I have here is, I've seen a trend with single sign-on like businesses like Google and Facebook that use it. Now attackers need to only get your Google username and password to hack into other accounts. And what are my thoughts on it? Yes, you're absolutely right. That's one of the biggest things. The Federal Trade Commission just came out with a public service announcement reminding people that if you use single sign-on like Google or Facebook and they get hacked, you need to reset your password anyways, even if Facebook says they fixed it. I think you should also probably do multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. Like Facebook and all the other ones have an ability to set up on their, and I have it for my Google. Anytime I log into Google, I have to go to my phone and I have to swipe to let me in. That sucks if I lose my phone. So anytime you do any of those type of multi-factor or two-factor authentications, you want to have a website that gives you more than one option. So, for example, I think with Facebook, you can get a text or you can go into the Facebook app on your phone, and in your phone, select it is me logging in from the Facebook app that's on your phone. So there's two different ways that you could go about it, and I think they can also call you. Google does something similar to that. All of them have it. LinkedIn has it. Microsoft accounts have it. I highly recommend putting that in there. Some of them are, unfortunately, you need a degree in cybersecurity to understand how someone gets set up. Some of them are not straightforward. I tell you right now, Microsoft's is not straightforward. I really am disappointed in them in that. Facebook's is much more easy to set up as far as setting up the multi-factor authentication. There's also multi-factor authentication apps that you can get. There's a whole bunch of different ones in this. You look in the Google Play Store or iTunes, and you can look at different authenticator apps. And basically what an authenticator app is it gives you a one-time password. So what you would end up getting is you'd go to Facebook or someplace like that, you'd pop up, and then you'd get, it asked you for a code. You go to your phone to get that code, and you type it in. What happens when you lose your phone? Again, you need another alternate means of either getting a text or some other type of thing as a way of getting your authentication done, because if something happens to that account, you're SOL, right? And Microsoft already says, hey, if you do the Authenticator app, and this is the only way to do it, and you get locked out of your account, it could take up to a month to get back into it, because they got to verify who you are, and they got to go through this whole other process. So I recommend being very careful about those things. Just make sure that there's more than one option. I don't know which one I set up. I set it up for most of my accounts. One of them was really easy. It told me, it said, hey, set up multiple ways of authenticating your thing, and then when you log in, you type in your password, then you'll say which one you want to do, and then we'll do it. Why doesn't everybody do that? I don't know. It should be that easy. Like it says, do you want us to get a text? Do you have an authenticator app? Do you do this? Do you do that? How do you want to log in? Here's your multiple options. You set up all those options in advance, and then you can do it. That's what I think. I know it's not really nation state related, but Facebook was just in the news related to that. Do you have any closing comments, Mr. Rob?
We need to do our due diligence. We have to take an initiative. We have to put security in the forefront of everything we do. Because no matter where a device comes from, we, the consumer, has to be the one who's ultimately responsible in adding and verifying the security levels as best we can. And I know that as an example, like this morning, it's very difficult because Apple just announced that some of their hardware devices have additional components from a nation state.
Hey, you're giving it away. We're going to talk about that next week.
I know, but that's why. But we have to do our best at what we can, right? So we have to learn these technologies and, incorporate encryption whenever we can, and use it as a primary means of authenticating our accounts. And like you said, we as consumers need to start picking applications that we use and websites that we visit that are putting our data at the forefront, right? Of security.
I agree.
So they have to take the necessary steps and precautions, and if they don't do that and they don't disclose that they're doing these steps, we don't use their applications. And yes, that may be that we may not be using the most popular application or the most popular device. However, our data is more sought after by threat actors. So
yeah, definitely.
I think that's about it.
And just as a reminder, follow us on Bright Talk, and you can follow us on Facebook, learnsecurity.org. If you look it up on Facebook, you'll find our page. We also have a blog, learnsecurity.org. And like I mentioned, Rob had an article that he wrote about IoT. And we have other things being posted about nation-state actors as well coming up. And join us next time and when we talk about cyber espionage and what nation-states are doing related to that. Thank you very much for attending. Oh, and please give us any feedback on our sessions that you would like to give us. Thank you. Bye.